At the end of 2018, I was in spiritual burnout. I'd been cycling through dozens of practices, but none of them were getting at my deepest stresses and attachments. I was drowning in an ocean of conflicting advice, reaching out for awakening as if it were a life raft, but finding only more water. Until one day, insight finally struck. I realized that the techniques I'd been applying, and the thousands of variations on them, were all mental processes. And the issues I was attempting to fix with them were mental processes too. So I was trying to fix my problems on the same level I was creating them. Suddenly it felt absurd that I ever thought this could work. And what followed was the end of my spiritual seeking and the beginning of a new life characterized by effortless peace, clarity, and effectiveness. Since then, I've taught hundreds of people to end their seeking too. Paul's lasted 50 years before the penny finally dropped for him during one of my videos. So in this video, I'm going to show you what I showed him. You were born with a clean installation of your human operating system, which came with simple software like attention.exe, pattern recognition.exe, imitation.exe, and memory.exe. This basic setup enabled you to learn, to install more software. But you didn't yet have sophisticated tools like discernment.exe to tell what was helpful from what was harmful. Nor did you have social boundaries.exe to guard you against insecure connections. So you automatically installed everything you came into contact with and ended up running buggy software like anxiety.exe, self-doubt.exe, perfectionism.exe. These were installed via insecure connections to websites like generationaltrauma.com, bullying.com, discipline.com. Buggy software hogs resources, which makes your human operating system feel slow and unresponsive. In extreme cases, it can even cause crashes like panicattack.exe or dissociation.exe. Now, if those are common for you, those crashes, I strongly recommend getting professional support alongside your exploration of this teaching. So, your teens and early 20s were messy and confusing, just like mine, but by the time you reached adulthood, you'd installed one other piece of software which would turn out to save your life. Introspection.exe enables you to see what's going on in your operating system. When you first ran it, you discovered tons of buggy software running constantly in the background. So you ran problemsolving.exe. You searched tons of websites and eventually found spirituality.com, which hosts hundreds of programs that promise to fix your OS. For example, breathmeditation.exe, lovingkindness.exe, vipassana.exe, yoga.exe. You were overwhelmed, but you picked one and ran with it. You diverted to it then all the resources you could spare, and it helped. But then it stopped helping. So you went back to spirituality.com and tried something else, and that helped too, until it didn't. Each new spiritual practice you ran seemed to work at first, but the results always plateaued. For example, you might have shut down weeddependency.exe, but then failed to get at restlessness.exe, which popped up in its place. So you started pushing more and more resources to one of your most reliable tools. But this would turn out to be a trap. Effort.exe helped you tremendously in the beginning of your spiritual practice. It also helped you, of course, to gain skills, status, income through your worldly pursuits. You had every reason to believe it would help you here too. But it didn't. In fact, it did the opposite. And this brings us to today. For some reason, the more resources you dedicate to effort.exe, the more you find old bugs starting up again. Anxiety.exe constantly worries something is wrong with your system and whether spiritual software is simply incompatible for you. Self-doubt.exe loops on questions like, did I choose the right practice? Did I understand it correctly? Am I too dumb to get enlightened? Perfectionism.exe opens dozens of browser tabs on spirituality.com and searches frantically for something you might have missed. The cure has become the disease. You know intellectually that you're in a better condition than before you downloaded any spiritual software, but the bug-free operation it promises somehow feels farther off than ever. A few more things are troubling you too. One, the benefits you do get from your spiritual software depend on you running it for hours each day. When you don't, your old bugs come right back. Two, the software doesn't state how long you'll have to keep using it. It talks about that goal of bug-free operation, enlightenment, awakening, but it never gives you a clear time frame regarding when you'll achieve it. 3, everything on spirituality.com is software that tries to fix other software. This is what I was engaged with at the rock bottom of my own struggle, trying to solve my problems at the same level I was creating them. There's no shortage of dedicated practitioners who've been running their spiritual software for decades, like Paul. Yet, millions of them are no closer to getting rid of their lingering bugs. If you really want to be bug-free, you must learn to understand your system in a whole new way. In this metaphor I'm presenting to you, software represents mental emotional processes. You've probably figured that out. The operating system, though, represents awareness. It's the environment or space in which all mental emotional processes run and all data, experience, is processed. When you think of an operating system, you likely think of a login screen and a bunch of menus and settings, but it's much more than that. It is the invisible foundation of everything that occurs. Awareness is the same. Without an OS, no software can run. Without awareness, you don't even exist. But here's the best news you'll ever hear. The OS, at its core, cannot be affected by buggy software. It may feel as though the OS is infected, but at the deepest level, all it's doing is processing data impartially. The problems are actually all occurring at a more surface layer. They can get pretty deep, as in the case of trauma, right? But they're never as deep as awareness, because they couldn't exist without awareness. Awareness is their basis. And all the software on spirituality.com, while somewhat beneficial, is ultimately just a bunch more processes that obscure your naturally bug-free default mode. Not as in neuroscience's default mode network, but as in your natural, optimal way of being. And all you need to do, friend, is recognize this. So let me show you how. Good news, first of all, you do not need another piece of software. Actually, all you need to do is hit ctrl+alt+delete. No matter what you're involved in, you can use this shortcut to zoom out, rest a moment, and see all the software you're running with perfect clarity. But if you're like everyone else, in the next moment, you'll zoom right back in on something. Your phone rings and you run obligation.exe. You smell someone's lunch from the other room and you run desire.exe. You remember a deadline and you run stress.exe. But you can just hit ctrl+alt+delete again and zoom back out. You might imagine this will slow you down, and maybe it will while you're getting familiar with it. But something amazing happens as you continue. 1, the more moments you spend zoomed out, the more you see how unnecessary your buggy software is. 2, the more you see how unnecessary your buggy software is, the less resources you dedicate to it. 3, the less resources you dedicate to your buggy software, the more likely it is to simply self-terminate. And when it does, which is inevitable if you simply keep zooming out, seeing things as they are, then finally you're left running in bug-free default mode. And in default mode, you're actually faster, much faster. Think about it. How efficient would you be without any of those bugs running? You'd pick up calls on your own schedule and respond with appropriate boundaries. You'd be content as you are, hungry or not, and undistracted by your colleague's burrito. You'd be focused exclusively on completing the task in front of you, which is how you meet a deadline. Default mode is naturally effective. In fact, all the good qualities spirituality.com promises in its advertising are actually built right in to your OS. They're always present, but they're obscured while buggy software hogs your resources. I'm talking about qualities like peace, clarity, wisdom, presence, efficiency, resilience, acceptance, confidence, compassion. These are expressed naturally to the degree that you debug your system and free up your resources. Eventually, when you're called to act, you'll run only extremely simple, lightweight, bug-free software like articulate.exe, appreciate.exe, cooperate, empathize, sacrifice, forgive, listen, assert, decide, focus.exe. When I first heard all of this, it seemed too good to be true. But I'll tell you what every one of my teachers told me. You don't have to believe any of this. You only have to test it for yourself. The first step is to simply hit ctrl+alt+delete for the first time and get a taste of what it's like to zoom out. So let's do it together right now. Consider everything that you're aware of in this moment. Don't try to include anything that's absent. Don't try to exclude stuff you don't like. For example, you might be running some buggy software right now, but don't try to force quit it. That's not our game. Rather, we hit ctrl+alt+delete and zoom out to appreciate, acknowledge, recognize the greater context, the space in which, the environment in which everything that is occurring is occurring. Instead of being involved in, subscribed to the contents of awareness, you are instead awareness itself. Just looking, just seeing, perceiving all that's occurring without judgment or reaction. If a reaction occurs, then you simply perceive that. You ctrl+alt+delete out of that. This is who you really are. And from here, you can acknowledge that awareness is the common ingredient in all experience. In just the same way as the operating system is always on, no matter what software is running, awareness is always on, no matter what mental emotional processes you're running. And it's always perfectly clear. All we're doing here is simply recognizing this. Every experience you've ever had has come and gone in this space, including experiences that you label as yourself. The experience of a body, the experience of a mind and its contents, thoughts, feelings, these all come and go, but awareness remains. This is all it means to hit ctrl+alt+delete in my little metaphor. And you can do this anytime, anywhere, to see your buggy software for what it is: mental emotional processes, data, which cannot survive when you see it in this way. Maybe you glimpsed some relief here, friend. Maybe it will take a while of familiarizing yourself with this recognition. Either way, if what I've shared with you here makes sense, then I encourage you to simply continue to experiment with it. Don't buy in, don't subscribe. Experiment, test, explore. But this is only the beginning of the beginning. The next step, if you want to take it, is to tell me how this video struck you, plus a bit more about where you're at in this whole picture. So please run my 1-minute system diagnostic. It's just 3 multiple choice questions. Your answers will tell me what guidance to give you next. There's a link in the description. Following that, we can begin your debugging process for real and get you one step closer to effortless peace.